Morning, everyone. Pastor Chuck Blair here. Great to have you joining me this morning for our 10 minutes of morning calm. And today we're looking at one of those very, very consistent messages that comes out of a Christian New Church perspective. And it's a message around despair and the message around when life really feels like upside down, where everything feels upside down. And there are times, I want to be clear, there are times where life absolutely is upside down, sometimes tragically so. And probably most of us, not all of us, I'm sure, but most of us have at least a couple times during the week where it just feels like life is upside down or a season that feels upside down. And there's this consistent message in Christian New Church theology around what those moments mean. And I remember being back in seminary and somebody had said, if you read New Church canon, read about 100 pages, you'll get the message. And this is a big part of that consistent message over and over and over again. And it's one very much grounded in the New Testament perspective that we see Jesus speaking to, and we see that just pulled out another step. So what I want to share with you is again, it's this passage that we're looking at, and the passage is the idea that we had 40 days in Noah and the ark. You had 40 days of flood, and then you had 150, right? 150 days. Make sure I got it right. Yeah, 150 days where the waters were going back and forth. In other words, the flood would come again, it would recede. The flood would come again, and it would recede. And we talked a lot about like how much of life feels this way. And I think these numbers are deliberate. The idea that we can hit a flood, we can hit a time where just a tragic event happens or something really hard. And you think about just that 40 days, a month and a half, where it's just like, just a complete slog. We just can't see straight. We can barely move. Waking up may be our biggest victory of the day. And it's not that the 40 days all of a sudden ends that. It's after that, there's an extended period where it just comes and goes. We can find ourselves laughing one minute, crying the next, being filled with hope one minute, being filled with despair the next. It's those back and forth. And a key thing to remember is that there's a way we can hold that to normalize it. And the normalizing it does not take it away. It doesn't take away the constant back and forth. It just is a way to hold the back and forth. I was working on a sermon for this Sunday, and this is a word I've used in here before. It's sort of those crucibles. The idea that a crucible holds something that is molten, as something that is changing form. And that's what faith does. It holds it. It doesn't solve it. It doesn't make it all okay. It just holds this one hard event. It holds it. So that's what I want to do is I want to read a couple of pieces for you about that. And this is where Emmanuel Swedenborg is sharing his perspective from his biblical commentary, the book Secrets of Heaven, and on what this all means. And I think this is really significant. He talks about times like this, again, when it's really all kind of up in the air. We are so unsure, we scarcely know whether anything is true. That's interesting, right? So we go through these periods and it's like back and forth. Because it's so back and forth, we start to have no clue what's even true. We can feel like, is anything true? Did way I see the world, was any part of it true? And then he goes on to say, unless the earlier way of life is destroyed and this uncertainty takes hold, spiritual seed cannot possibly be sown in us since there's no soil for it. That's an interesting concept. A quote I love, and those of you who know me know I love quotes. One I've loved is turn the soil, leave the rest to grace. I think that's a beautiful sentiment. Turn the soil, leave the rest to grace. As somebody grew up in a rural area where farming, a lot of people farmed, there were a lot of farm fields around where we lived, that idea of turning the soil, we turn the soil, then seeds come in and we just have to leave the rest to grace. We don't, any farmer would know that, right? We do what we can, and then you have to leave the rest to nature because you can't control that. You can't control a seed germinating. You can't control something growing. What we can control is what degree of trust do we put into the process. I want to say that again. What we can control is what degree of trust we put into the process. So I think what we're asked to do is just to have just a degree of trust that there is something happening here. And it's interesting with the way this is spoken of. It goes on to say that trials are the beginning of regeneration. That as these things happen and we feel disjointed and we feel hope one minute, despair the next, it's easy to think life will always be that way. It will not always be that way. That we can trust. Things do shift. And this may be this divergence, this variance between hope and despair constantly coming back, between anxiety and peace constantly going back and forth, is probably, if I'm reading the theology correctly, is a sign that growth is happening, and I think we see that. I mean, especially, my mind goes instantly to the Easter story here, right? Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? And that giving rise to Easter Sunday. Like, we're always at that back and forth and that back and forth. And can we just try to be like, can we just breathe into that and just be like, yep, this is the way life is, and that's okay. Because I think that in some way backs us out into, away from this out here, backs us out into a place of peace and calm and trust in God. And it's not an instantaneous backing out into this peaceful place. We'll live out there in the storms of things most of the time. And maybe there's just these little moments of grace, those little moments of grace where we just kind of see it a little bit more at arm's length, a little bit more removed from it. And that's where I think we'll start to understand the peace that passes all understanding, as Jesus said. So that's the thought for today, folks, is like, if you're finding yourself in those moments, it's easy to think something's wrong. And obviously there is something wrong. You wouldn't be feeling that way. But there's something very right happening as well. And what that right part is growth. Like, the soil is being turned. Something is being grown. And God is embedding something. Now, God doesn't create the test. He doesn't create this. Really clear about that. God does not create the test. He doesn't tempt us. He doesn't give us hard things to see how we'll do, or to toughen us up, or to soften us up. None of that, right? Those things happen, though. And where God's intention is over here, I'm pulling the best possible thing he can out of that. And that's, again, that goes back, if you didn't get a chance to watch yesterday's, that goes back to yesterday's service about new beginnings. So I hope that makes sense to you folks. Again, I always have to smile because Christian New Sociology comes back to this theme again and again and again. And it begs the question, why come back to it again and again and again? And the answer is pretty simple, because we need to hear it again and again and again. At least I know I do, and I imagine many of you do as well as you're tuning in today. So that's the thought, folks, for today. I hope that makes sense to you. And I hope you live a life today just where you can find a little peace and find a little trust, even if you're in those places where the flood seems to just keep on coming and going. So with that, friends, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a little prayer, a little meditation, a little prayer, a little blessing, and then we'll say hello to folks on social media. So the first part here, folks, is we're just going to do like a little meditation. So I'd ask us all to first start out just giving a big breath. And listen to the prayer bell. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I. Be still and know that. Be still and know. Be still and be still. Be. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. All right, dear friends, let's give a little cheery hello to folks. Say hi to everybody. Here we go. We had a bunch of comments today. All right. So let's get started here. Oh my goodness. I am so bad with this. I am constantly do not ever call me for any tech consulting at all, folks. All right, here we go. All right. Linda, good morning to you, my friend. I hope you're doing well. Patricia, great to see you joining us this morning. Sherry writes, have a peaceful weekend. Please keep the Boyce and Andrews family in your prayers. Yeah, a lot of thoughts there. Oh, you're gonna make me cry, Sherry. A lot of thoughts there. I was actually out with your fine son last night. Really good guy. So Linda writes, turn the soil, open our hearts, and know all will be well in time. Sometimes it's challenging to hold that truth, but when we can, we find peace. It's so true, right, Linda? And I feel like, boy, if we just get a glimpse of it, I used to be so frustrated, feeling like, no, I want to live there. And the reality is, we're living in this earth. So guess what? We don't get to live there. We get to visit there. And yeah, really well said there, my friend. Marcus, good morning to you, buddy. Mary writes, Grace always sends us lifeboats just in time to keep us from sinking. And that's so true. I mean, it's just a miracle. And they'll come from unexpected places, which is a whole nother sermon, um, uh, as well. Sherry writes, be still and know. Linda, did I miss the Our Father? I might have. Maybe I forgot it this morning. My apologies if I did. My apologies. All right. So let's say a little hello over here to folks who might be joining us on my particular Facebook page. We have a couple of comments over there too that I want to make sure I give people. Nope, no comments over there. So all good, folks. Wishing you all the best. God bless. Have a great weekend. Floods, sunshine, cold, warm, the whole thing, the seasons of life. Take care. God bless. Amen.